every morning on the frontage road just off the interstate. He wore an orange construction vest and battered work boots and looked more than a little ridiculous puttering down the bike lane the way he did. The outfit just didn't match the mode of transportation, but Alice had to hand it to the guy. That was dedication. Even the most judgmental person couldn't complain he wasn't willing to work. She imagined the determination that would lead a man to rent a scooter and drive it in the pre-dawn morning to work every day. She could envision him waking up in the dark, putting on his construction gear, walking to a bus stop somewhere in the next county, riding the bus to the nearby stop, renting the scooter at the self-serve kiosk in front of the Dollar Tree, driving it to his construction job, working outside all day, then reversing the whole procedure to get back home again. It seemed like a hard life, especially now in August when everything turned brown and dry in the withering heat. She found herself watching for him every day and giving a hesitant wave as she drove by on her way to the on-ramp, a wave that he eventually, hesitantly, returned. Alice hated to admit it, but she looked forward to this tiny connection and missed it when they failed to cross paths. Her husband died 4 years ago, colon cancer. His clothes were still hanging in the closet, and his car still sat in the garage. The effort of dealing with it was overwhelming. Her daughters had moved away and were appropriately preoccupied with children and spouses and jobs. There was always Doodle, but a dog's love, however exuberant, wasn't the same as a human connection. Her work was largely solitary, and there were times when she'd gone as long as 3 days without uttering a single word. The women in her book club urged her to sign up for a dating site, but she couldn't muster the desire to do it. Whenever she considered another romance at her age, her mind would play out the entire saga within a matter of minutes, all the way to the bitter end of changing out ostomy bags and turning him over to clean his bed sores. If she were honest with herself, it wasn't something she wanted to do again. When she saw the man on the rented scooter, she sometimes wondered about his life. There were versions of it in which he had 5 little kids at home and a car with a dead transmission he couldn't afford to repair. There were versions in which he was an illegal immigrant trying to make a life. There were still other versions in which he was a felon who had raped and murdered several women and been released from jail on a technicality, or had had his driver's license revoked after a 3rd DUI. Every time she felt her foot easing off the gas pedal to stop and offer him a ride, the self-preferring skeptic inside her prevented her from seeing it through. She couldn't decide if she was a pragmatist or a cynic. In January, a polar vortex dropped the temperature to 7 degrees, with a wind chill of 11 below. Cynic or not, Alice knew she wouldn't be able to live with herself if she didn't offer Scooter Guy a ride. He could get frostbite. She stopped the car. "It's cold. Do you want a ride?" He smiled, but warily. It hadn't occurred to Alice that he might think she was a serial killer. "I'm not a serial killer," she said. They both laughed. "I'll leave the scooter at the corner," he said. "Then I'd love to take you up on that ride." His name was Luis. He was 23. He didn't have a girlfriend. His parents lived in Juarez. He'd learned construction from his dad. He had 2 younger sisters back in Mexico. Alicia was a handful. He was working construction to pay for college without taking out student loans. He wanted to be a social worker so he could help other immigrants. He didn't have a car because he couldn't afford a car and school, but he was getting by. He missed his mom's tamales. He liked it when Alice waved to him because sometimes he felt lonely. "I can't make tamales," Alice said, and I can't afford to help you with your tuition, but I can pick you up at the bus stop and drive you to work so you don't have to ride that awful scooter." "I don't mind the scooter. Really, I don't," Louise protested. "A ride every day would be too much trouble." "It's really not," Alice said. 5 minutes out of my way tops, and I enjoyed talking to you." Things proceeded this way through the spring. Luis, Alice thought, was truly a lovely young man. Better than a lot of the guys where she worked, who acted like belligerent, entitled brats, and had barely managed to squeak through college on Mommy and Daddy's dime. Luis had good manners and a sensible head on his shoulders. It seemed outrageously unfair to Alice that someone like Luis had to work so hard when so many other young people who had every advantage simply threw their opportunities away. These thoughts were on her mind one April afternoon as she pushed the button on the garage door. Doodle came bounding out to greet her, kicking up a cloud of dust from the hood of Edgar's car. It occurred to her that it was a bit of a waste to leave a perfectly good vehicle sitting around with a dead battery, taking up space and collecting dust. Maybe, she thought, it was time to clean out the garage, the closet too, for that matter. It would be nice to have the extra space.